Can we ask just who owner is on that's in our meeting right now? Whose computer it is that's got the title owner? Okay, council, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've seen Councillor Jagowitz and Councillor Nishikawa. There we go, Councillor Nishikawa. We're on YouTube. We are recording. Councillor Zavitz has relocated to his Western office. Okay, we're missing Councillor Jagowitz, but I'm sure he will join us momentarily. It is 2:01, so I would like to officially call this meeting to order. We are missing Councillor Jagowitz currently. There he is. Welcome, Councillor Jagowitz. We also have all of our CIO clerk and other senior management team here. Today, we want to acknowledge that we're on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples, and it's Indigenous peoples that have cared for this territory for the benefit of future generations. Their stewardship throughout the ages is certainly recognized. Today's meeting, folks, is being live streamed, as we know, recorded at Township Muskoka Lakes. Those people who are participating in this meeting are consenting to their image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. So if that's not good with you, now would be the time to exit the meeting. We received some public comments from Tony and Jen Leitao regarding item 13A that was received through our public comment line. So thank you for that. We do not have a supplementary agenda today, but I will ask at this point if we have any declaration of pecuniary interests. Not seeing any from council. So that's great. We're going to move on. We do have some public comments coming in. I think let's just try and move through our consent agenda first of all, and then I'll come back to public comments. I do appreciate Mr. Fahner is in the room, wants to speak on item 9B1 and 9B3. Mr. Fahner, welcome. But going to our consent agenda, we have some inaction items from the General Finance Committee, our council minutes, and our Planning Committee minutes. And Councillor Nishikawa, I believe you may have a comment regarding one of those items. I'll turn to you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I can't quite pull it up properly on my other computer right now, but I believe it's GFC 5/16/02/22. The resolution.
GFC 11/16/22. Thank you.
Basically, I would like to remove that from this agenda today, and we'll bring it back to general finance in the future.
Okay, thank you. Let me go forward then without item number 11. Is there anybody else who wants to make any amendments to those first of all? So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Jagowitz. Be it resolved that the mayor and council adopt and enact the following minutes and recommendations contained in the March 16th, 2020 consent agenda and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. And that is number one, or February 16th, General Finance Committee meeting minutes and action items 1, 3 to 6, and 9. That will exclude item number 11. Also, number 2 are February 16th council minutes and February 17th are planning committee meeting minutes. Action items 1 through 14. Councillor Zavitz, question.
Thank you, and through you. Planning, Leitao, Black Lake. I know that it's on the agenda this afternoon, and we'll clearly have a chance to discuss it. I would want to have that opportunity, and so would either do it there or here by pulling this out of those minutes. Happy to do whatever you believe to be the proper way.
My understanding is there's not an action item.
So the question is, and I'll go to Director Pink potentially, but I'm not sure there's an action item for this morning on that particular, but Mr. Pink, maybe you can help us. Are you talking about the items, Councillor Zavitz, in our planning committee meeting specifically? I'm seeing.
Yes, where it was voted 5-5 as a tie.
Okay, so I'm just trying to look at, so there wouldn't be an action item because it would be defeated at that particular point. Mr. Pink, maybe you can chime in because there's not an action item.
Well, Council, good afternoon. Through your worship. Keep in mind that only council can defeat or pass a bylaw. So there's no need to open the action item. It was a recommendation from planning committee. It died. However, the bylaw is on the agenda. It will come later in the meeting and any councillor can speak to it prior to a vote.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Somebody wants me to turn my microphone up a little bit so people can hear. There we go. Any other comments from council on the resolution I just read, adopting the minutes and action items? I'm seeing none. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa has asked that we consider action item number 11 from GNF and as future meetings. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the February 16th, 2022 General and Finance Committee Resolution GFC 11-1622 be considered at a future General and Finance Committee meeting. Any further comments? Councillor Zavitz, want to comment on this?
Again, apologies through you. Without quick reference, and I don't have it in front of me, what is it we're removing?
Councillor Nishikawa, maybe you want to speak to this particular. Thank you.
The location that the director was advising on is not the location that the committee would like to go forward with.
It's the dog park, I believe, is it not?
It is the dog park, but we're hoping to move it to the larger grassed area, not to a little, anyhow.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I'm supportive of that. You just used the word committee. What committee is this?
We have a Parks and Recreation Committee.
Okay, so I'm going to take, so Councillor Zavitz, if I may, and Councillor Nishikawa, I think the recommendation that is contained within the minutes that we see might not accurately be reflective of what the Parks and Recreation Trails Committee would like to see. So Councillor Nishikawa has asked for it to be pulled and we can debate about it later on at a more fulsome time. That's okay. Anybody else, any comments? All those in favor?
Carried.
That is carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to get rid of those. We do have, as I say, a couple of invited delegations at 1 o'clock. Mr. Fahner as well. Why don't we jump ahead and do that? I also see Mr. Leitao is with us and Mr. Fahner. Who would like to go? Wait, Mr. Fahner is not talking about Latino. So let's go to Mr. Latino first of all, and then we'll get back to Mr. Fahner. So maybe we can bring him, he and his wife into the meeting, I believe. They're just letting them in. And for those tuning in, this is regarding item 9B6. Six. Second there. There we go. Mr. Leitao, welcome. And the floor is yours. You've got 2 minutes to address our council. Thank you. Just get you to unmute your microphone. There we go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Tony Leitao, and I reside at 1143 Torrance Road with my family, including our newest addition, Noah, that decided to come 3 weeks early. I apologize for taking up more of your time, but it is important for me and my family to give this one last more chance and to clarify some of the questions and confusions raised at the last committee meeting, as we are very devastated by the decision. I sent a letter on March 3rd, and I'm not going to go through the whole letter, but however, I want to highlight a few key points. Before I do, you will note that I did not bring my planner or the lawyer, as this is a delegation from me and my family. My letter provided a timeline with respect to our real estate deal and stated why we did not have the ability to back out of the deal based on the misinformation from the previous owner. As a result, and in response to the orders to comply, we had to proceed with an amendment to your official plan and zoning bylaw. These applications should not set a stage for similar requests in the future, nor be a precedent-setting decision. It's only specific to our situation at this point. Only council can help to fix the lot coverage issue and make a decision on our application. This has to be completed before addressing the orders to comply. Please remember that our application failed due to a split vote, 5-5. This is completely heartbreaking for our family, as half of you support our request. Thank you for your support and understanding of our situation. We kindly ask one or a few of you that have voted against the application to have a change of heart and allow us to stay here at this home, to be our home. Please make the right decision regarding our situation and circumstances that we're in, and based on your decision on the merits of our request. Providing this application will ensure that we continue living here, being part of the Torrance community, and raising our 3 children for years to come. I must restate that no one submitted a letter of objection. In fact, we received a considerable support from the community. Approval will remove some of the illegal developments built by the previous owners, and it will take us one step closer to resolving the orders with the building department. I would ask you again to kindly help us in resolving this unforeseen nightmare and allow us to work through the appropriate municipal channels to resolve these issues. And to have, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous this moment.
No, Tony, we appreciate that. And just to wrap it up, and I realize for both of you, just let me say that this is extremely emotional. This is your home that you've purchased and are attempting to make right at the end of the day. So take a deep breath and I'll give you another 30 seconds to sort of wrap up your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll kindly request council to reconsider our application and more importantly, to support. We don't wish upon anyone. It has impacted our lives and health. This is very rare, and I hope it doesn't happen to any other family. I am happy to answer any questions, and thank you so much for listening to us. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
I kind of started a little bit too. I'm sorry.
You okay?
Yes.
There we go. Thank you. And I do appreciate it to where we're at. Council, I'll turn it over to you. We do have, and I can move this item up on our agenda from our bylaw perspective. If any councillor would like to speak to it in particular. Councillor Zavitz and then Councillor Nishikawa.
Well, thank you. And through you, I do want to speak to it. I was there yesterday at their home and spent considerable time with the family. You know, a couple of things that come to mind when you actually site visit and you actually experience firsthand. The roof on the garage, which we're in question, or you know, whatever piece of the property that we think is quite over roof coverage. That roof has clearly been there for 6, 8, 10 years. It's really unique that we're talking about a proper. This is not, so everyone understands, this is not a new build. This is not something like we've experienced before. This is quite old. This is aged, if you will. I was surprised when I looked at the roof and I said, well, that looks like my roof, which has been here since 2010. So, you know, for a lot of reasons, I know that this doesn't augur well, but it was the closest vote that I've ever seen at 5-5. And, you know, I personally would love to see one of my peers turn the table on this. I know that there's a lot of dynamics. I know that there's, you know, lawyers and title insurance, but at the end of the day, you know, legal non-complying, and I know I've already asked these questions last month of David, so there's not many more questions to be answered, one supposes. This just does not feel right to me. I know that I could defend my situation, my position on this, and how I'm going to vote again in support. And if people don't like it, that's just the way it is. I mean, we every day in planning have many factors to consider. And I think this is a challenging one, very challenging. You can tell 5-5. That never happens to us as a group. And I'm hoping that it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. It's not so difficult for me because it's interesting because I've sat on this council where we've had on the big lakes, you know, and I would say that wealth is involved. We've seen whole boat, I mean, a whole island being developed without a single building permit. And then finding out that that was a $25,000 fine. That was it. And I'm talking a boathouse, one of those 10,000 square foot cottages, you know, the excessive stuff, right? And in fact, they were treated very differently, I would say, than we have treated this particular property owner. Black Lake is pretty much built out. And in fact, most of the cottages and homes that I've been in are 50 plus years. Interestingly, and I'd asked David, and now I'm going to ask him again after I'm finished, but just to confirm what the lot coverage was in 2008, because you know, that's when we made the changes in our lot coverage. So now we talk about, oh, it's so onerous that, you know, they're only allowed 8% lot coverage and look at what they've done. But in fact, most of the cottages on the lake enjoyed that larger lot coverage. I don't know what we're trying to gain by imposing any more restrictions or hardships on this particular property. If we want to find them, let's just find them, like, let's be done with it. But I don't think that we're going to gain anything. At least this application allowed us to remove some of the dock, which was one of the issues I had, was the dock. And I think that we would lose that opportunity if we weren't going to be able to pass this. And we all know what happens, what the next steps could be. I would be really concerned that, and again, I've seen stuff get turned over by others than what our township has wanted, much worse situations. So again, I'm not sure what council is trying to achieve, or what what kind of messages we're trying to send, because in fact, though these aren't the people that we're trying to send messages to. Much like we will see a lot of in our planning meetings, it's really about, it seems like those that have seem to take more than, but that's not the situation here. So I would really, again, respectfully ask that council consider this, because I don't, again, or at least give them a direction. Do you want a fine imposed? Then let's do that. I don't know that we're allowed to, but again, it's that type of conversation. I didn't hear that type of conversation last time. I just heard no. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Pink briefly, because Councillor Nishikawa did ask a question. I'd like to actually hear that answer as well. Director Pink, back in 2007, 2008, was there increased rights associated with that lot that have changed subsequently?
Through your worship, there was a significant zoning bylaw change that was passed in January 5th, 2005, and it did result in categorization of the lakes in the township, and it reduced the lot coverage from 10% essentially across the board in the waterfront to 8% on Black Lake. So it did go from 10% to 8% in January of 05.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hayes and Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, and through you, I did support the Leitao application when it was here at planning, and I will do so again today. The Leitaos did not overbuild the property. They did not build without a permit. Somebody else did that, and they did it 10 years ago. And it seems kind of mean-spirited to punish the Leitaos for something that somebody else did. And I think that we have to realize that, yes, we didn't catch it for 10 years. It's been around that long. So I would encourage councillors to support it and get on with it. If there's any fine, I would like to fine the original owner and not the Leitaos, but I don't think that's possible. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Quite honestly, Councillor Hayes, I think we'd all like to do more than just fine the original owners for what's happened to this family. But having said that, it is the ability to go back to those owners and get back what you need to get. So the one thing I've learned in planning is you have to take the emotions out of this. The planning is about what's on the piece of paper in front of you and what's on the lot. And this family was smart enough to buy title insurance, and we went all through that at the planning committee. I know but now what I'm going to say to you is my concern is we are looking at saying yes to lot coverage, which is double what we allow. And the OLT doesn't look at particular situations. I think setting this kind of a precedent would be really, really awful in terms of our planning. And so there is no way I can support it with the amount of over coverage that is here. If it was brought down much closer to what's allowed, I could certainly have another look at that, but we're not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm still going to support this. They bought into a very bad situation. Our building department should have caught this 10 years ago when it was going up. Our bylaw officers and that. They asked if there was anything outstanding. They were told no from the township. They have 15 letters of support from around the lake. We have 3 councillors in that ward that are supporting it. And that the least we can do is help these people out. It's not setting a precedent at this time, because I'll tell you, I don't think there'll be anybody else coming in with the exact same situation as the family that's coming in. And it will cause more harm taking a garage or something like that down. I would leave it alone. There's 15 people on the lake say it's fine. Our 3 councillors in that area say it's fine. I will definitely be supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jagowitz.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Director Pink. What I've heard here today is a request for some alternative other than this being turned down. And your report to the committee recommended that it be turned down. Do you have any other option to offer, or is that still your recommendation?
Mr. Pink, I'm not sure if you want to answer that or if we want Manager Sharp to answer that, but I'll let you decide.
I apologize. Whoever it was supposed to be directed to can answer it, certainly.
Mr. Pink's camera's on.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think staff certainly is open if the applicants wish to further discuss and revise the proposal. Council could choose to send it back to Planning Committee for further discussions. I don't know if you wish to ask the applicants if they're amenable to further changes, however, but certainly staff would not be opposed to reviewing revisions to the application if that's what the parties wish.
Okay, thank you. I'll just specifically to Leitao's, I think, to follow up where Councillor Jagowitz may go. Mr. Leitao, would you be open to additional considerations beyond? I know there's some suggested minor amendments in this particular, but if this council was to support, I'm going to suggest through first and second reading, is there some further considerations that might be possible through discussion with our staff going forward? Are you open to looking at that?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jagowitz, I had sort of jumped in, sort of responding to where your question had gone. Did that suffice to where you were going to go, or did you have a supplemental?
Just a supplemental comment. I appreciate you for asking that question. I was going to do the same. But I voted against this at the last meeting, and if it's voted on here, I'll vote against it again. But I would vote for a deferral to allow the opportunity for those discussions to take place, to see if there's any way of working it out. Because I understand it's a hardship, but I also understand that there are bigger issues here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz and Ishikawa both have spoken on this. Just want to get a pulse, generally speaking, of council to go forward here. If Mr. Sharp wanted to comment, I think we could potentially, and I think there might be, I appreciate the Leitao's openness to try and find further resolve. Mr. Sharp, are we out of step if we were to give first and second reading today, leave it as a pause? We could always turn down third if there were no changes, or see where it goes at that particular point. But to try and move this forward, to have the Leitao's come back to us at a further time. What would your recommendation be if we were to go down this road? Mr. Sharp?
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, Council and the Leitao's. Thank you for being here today and for delegating. I would look to perhaps Mr. Pink to provide some more insight with respect to the way forward, but I believe we have put in front of you, Your Worship, some suggested minor amendments if Council were looking to approve this matter, and perhaps I'm thinking if that could be done today in some way, shape, or form versus kicking it back to Planning Committee. But there may be process considerations that I'm not aware of, and that's why I'd ask Mr. Pink to step in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pink, I'm not sure whether Council has seen the perceived or potential, minor amendments. One of them is to remove, prior to our third reading, covered roof sun decks, covered roof and roof entry associated as the as-built, which would reduce the lot coverage down to 11.6. Was that contemplated originally, or is that a new amendment coming forward out of the last meeting? Mr. Pink?
Thank you, Your Worship. My suggestion to return to Planning Committee was simply because I don't know if this is the right forum to have a sort of a passionate, highly emotional type of debate. It might be worthwhile for the applicants to have some time to look at what revisions they wish. However, technically speaking, you have the bylaw in front of you. You have the right to pass minor amendments to make changes. Staff did include those minor amendments in the report because I believe they were suggested. I don't know, and I looked to Mr. Sharp, I'm not sure if they were sufficient to garner staff support. However, those were talked about at Planning Committee. Again, my suggestion is likely better to have the discussion at Planning Committee. so that they can formally amend their application and submit revised plans so that we can review those in more detail.
Okay, Mr. Pink, if I may just supplemental to you specifically, or maybe even the clerk to chime in, are we okay to provide potentially a first and second, which would tell the Latinos that we're interested in working with them, or would you prefer us to defer all and go back to a planning committee? I'll look at your perspective.
It's likely best just to defer all. You're certainly within your prerogative to give first and second reading. However, that implies approval in principle. And I'm not sure if there's support for approval in principle right now for what you have in front of you. So perhaps some potential mixed messaging there. However, it wouldn't tie your hands for later defeating any proposal, but my suggestion would likely be just to leave it as is and revert it back to planning committee if that's council's wish.
Okay, I'm just going to, there's lots of hands up. We can continue to debate this at council. I'd prefer not. I'm just going to get a sense of if council would like to refer this back to planning committee at this time and trying to getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we have consensus there. So Mr. Leitao, job well done today. The reality is that we are going to refer this back to our planning committee. But we're going to be asking you, and I think if you listen to the overall direction, to try and find some kind of additional compromise to find a way to keep you in your home as stated, but working with our planning staff for an appropriate solution to meet council's wishes. So again, nodding of heads, Madam Clerk, we're okay to refer this back? Can I just get a show of hands of who would like to refer this back? Anybody who does not want to refer this back, wants to vote on it today? Okay, it is going to be referred back. Councillor Nishikawa, you want to provide a comment?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I really don't like the direction that you took this in. I believe that there was an opportunity to hear the application as it was planned. The recommendations were already laid out at the last meeting. And if that's what we're doing now is basically saying to councillors, you get one question or one comment, then let's put the rules out on the table, because that's kind of what you just did. And I think you took an opportunity away from these owners for others to speak. And I hope that's not the way that we're going to deal with other applications, because it's just not fair.
So
really, I don't understand why you did that.
So I appreciate that. I think the issue at the table, to be honest, and sitting in this chair and reading the room, was that this may or may not fail or may not pass. And I know that all the Ward A councillors are certainly in favor of this passing. And I think it's a safer method to move this back to planning committee and try and get at least 6 or 7 people out of planning committee. So we will have the opportunity at that time for multiple discussions as we do intercommittee level. And Mr. and Mrs. Leitao, again, we can work with you to make sure we hopefully get to the right finish line. Because if people had not changed their mind, you were not going to get to the right finish line today. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Madam Clerk, you're good that we're going to refer this back to planning. Greatly appreciated. Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. and Mrs. Leitao, for joining us today. Okay, let's moving on. Mr. Fahner, I think, is in the house. We'll bring him into the meeting. And we are going to refer to item 9B1, the Brown application. Let's do that one first of all, if we may. And just connecting to audio. We'll let you address council first of all, and then I'll go to our staff just for an overview report. Mr. Fahner, camera just turned off. Mr. Fahner cannot hear you. If you're speaking, there's your camera.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now, Mr. Mayor?
We can certainly hear you loud and clear. Well,
certainly loud. Good. Just decided to put a booster on just for you.
My hearing aids are turned up. Thank you.
Yeah, the odd thing is that I can barely hear you, but as long as you can hear me, that's the main thing. I was listening on my phone, so there's obviously a delay. So I'm just assuming that you're at the matter regarding the Brown application.
That is correct. We'll start with
Okay,
that.
thank you. Thank you. Just again, for the record, Steve Fahner, Northern Vision Planning Limited, 109 Meadow Heights Drive, Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L184, representing David Brown, and he has an application in. I originally applied as a delegation because actually my client was concerned about a neighbor to the southeast who actually never made comment, but was thinking may want to get into the discussion here at council. So that's why I did originally delegate. But I just wanted to make a couple of points. He's agreed to remove the carport portion of the dock. He's moving his boathouse to increase side yard setbacks. He's also willing to enter into a site plan agreement for planting. So I think he's gone very, in my opinion, I think he's gone a bit above and beyond, but he's willing to do that. So that's great when you have a cooperative client and applicant. There were a couple of letters of support in this application. I just wanted to mention one thing, and maybe a discussion for another day, but the fact of withholding third reading, and I know it's a practice that's been used from time to time. Now that I'm on the other side, but this is one of the first ones this has happened in cases of my client's applications. He did have some good questions and some issues, I guess, if you will, but he's willing to certainly work with the municipality. By withholding third reading, he's going to have to bring a barge in twice to, remove a portion of the dock, first of all, and then come back later and demolish the boathouse and remove that. And he does, again, questions from him is, he's doing all this, he's removing the carport, he's removing a portion of the dock, and that's prior to third reading. So he hasn't got approval yet. So he is, there is a risk involved and certainly cost involved to do that. And yet he's, not guaranteed that he's going to get third reading. So he just sort of wanted that pointed out, and maybe again, a discussion for another day, but maybe there's a way of using holding zones in some aspect, related to this, because it is somewhat similar. It's too bad that we don't have conditional zoning available to us, and it's not used, certainly not by the township anyways. With minor variances, you have the benefit of conditions, but you don't with zoning, unfortunately. So you get into a bit of a challenge as to how you implement these things. So I just wanted to point that out. Certainly he'd love to get 3 readings, but if need be, he's willing to have second reading withheld and considered after the portion of the dock is removed and the carport. Again, he'd love to have 3 readings, but we'll leave it in your hands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Sharp, did you want to comment on this before I agree first or second reading?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been generally common practice to require a third reading. Of course, we try to avoid it if we don't feel it's absolutely necessary. But in this particular case and in others as well, it's a method that we use when a zoning bylaw amendment application is in play to ensure that any buildings or structures that are intended to be removed do in fact get removed, so that they don't become a compliance issue or an administrative burden for staff down the road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm actually going to read first and second reading, moved by Councillor Jankowicz, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-160 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 Brown Rule 8322 be read a first and second time. Any comments on first and second? All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we're good. Thank you. Mr. Sharp, you do recommend some minor amendments prior to third reading. Are there some specific ones that you have, Mr. Sharp, in here? No minor amendments?
I would actually perhaps look to Ms. Darling to provide some insight into that regard, but just as far as process goes, usually the third readings would be, I believe, read before, or sorry, the minor amendments would be read prior to third reading. So that would happen when the matter comes back for third reading. Thank you.
Okay, not a problem. Do you have any minor amendments that we would recommend prior to third meeting in this, Ms. Darling?
There's 3, Your Worship. So the first is to remove the carport as intended prior to third reading.
The second is the proposed lot and development being made subject to site plan control. And the third is a reduction in width of the existing dock prior to third reading.
Okay. Okay, so I appreciate that. So we're not, at this point, you're recommending that we actually don't even read the minor amendment at this point. We would wait until third reading. Okay. Anybody, any other comments? Okay to hold on third reading and minor amendments appropriately? Mr. Fahner, sorry, we're going to get the application through, but we're going to withhold third reading. Okay, committee, everyone okay to defer third reading on this and minor amendments? We're good. Thank you very much. Mr. Fahner, why don't we, while we've got you on the phone, we'll move on to item 9B3, Ontario Inc., Village Harbour.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, Steve Fahner representing the Ontario Incorporated number. Steve Staley is the actual owner and principal of that for Village Harbour Marina. Again, I'm just going to be very brief on this. There were some letters of support. There were a couple of letters of objection, and where there are objection, I like to be available for council to answer questions as well as make a few points. So certainly I've reviewed the proposed zoning bylaw exemption and have indicated to Mr. Sam Soya that we're fine with those, with the proposed bylaw and its wording. There is a definition of marina there. It does include 24 boat slips for island or water access property owners, and those would be available. It also includes staff quarters as well. I just wanted to point out a discussion that I had with the owner of Lakeshore Marina in Gravenhurst, because it's there are some direct parallels with that marina. I spoke with David Kopus, and they have 6 housekeeping units on their property, and they actively rent them out. And he did say that that does subsidize their marine operation. It would be kind of doubtful if they're viable without that. Interestingly, they have absolutely no area for swimming or docking, which Village Harbour Marina actually does for its renters. So it's actually set up better. There is a more segregated area, if you will, for the renters versus the marina owners. So it actually works fairly well. He also indicated they do have staff quarters on site in that particular case, and that's what we're attempting to do here as well. But I would indicate that Village Harbour Marina is a little bit more removed from sort of the urban centers within Muskoka. The people would have farther to go. So to me, it even heightens the need for staff quarters on site. And he fully, he being Mr. David Kopus, fully agrees that it's very important to have that additional staff quarters on site. It's definitely helped their operation. So I just thought I'd pass those comments along. Again, it's there's some direct parallels with that particular marina, because I do know it was noted that this marina is unique in Muskoka Lakes, that it does have housekeeping cottages, but it's not unique in Muskoka per se. So anyways, I'm here to answer any questions, and I'm hoping that Planning Council, or sorry, Council will agree to 3 readings on this one. As I say, I agree with the wording of the zoning bylaw exemption put forward by staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead with first and second reading on this, moved by Councillor Edwards, second by Councillor Bridgman. Be resolved that bylaw 2021-162 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14, Brent Rule 615-15, be read a first and second time. Comments on the first and second reading, Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, and through you, I've got, I don't know if they're questions or comments or both. As I understand it, I want to make sure that I'm not playing from the wrong information. This particular approval is conditional only on the fact that the use of this structure will be ancillary to the main permitted use on the land, which in the bylaw is identified as a marina. And I got a couple of questions that come from that. Last night, I Googled the marina to see what I could find, and you can't find a website for the marina. You can find the website for something called Muskoka Village Harbour, drop the marina, which is kind of held out as a, doesn't use the word resort, but it's held out as a cottage rental facility where you can book them online, you can check availability online. every one of the cottages that's listed in here, and interestingly, there's only 3 that I could find, although I understand there are 5. They all say lakefront with private dock. So I guess my first question is, what makes us believe that the main permitted use is that of a marina, other than the fact that we're trying to assert that in the bylaw? Because it looks to me like the main use here is some sort of cottage rental facility, cottage rental business. That's number one. Number two, assuming we go ahead with this, what kind of ability do we have, or do we expect to take, to monitor compliance and to monitor that the unit that's being proposed here is used in fact for staff quarters and is not on a rental basis with the rest of the stuff that's on this website? So that's a question for, I guess, our planning department or Mr. Fahner, whoever wants to field them. Thank you.
I'm going to start with our planning department to answer those two, first of all, and if they want to defer to Mr. Fahner to answer some of the first, that'd be great. And I'm not sure whether Mr. Sharp or Ms. Darling would like to tackle those questions on how we enforce this within our bylaws and how we ensure a marina is a marina, first of all. I'm not seeing Mr. Sharp or Ms. Darling's camera turn on. Mr. Fahner, you might be up. There we go. Mr. Sharp. And Mr. Pink. Bryce.
Thank you. Yes, I might have to look to Mr. Pink to back me up a little bit here. And I'm not sure I was totally following the line of questioning that Councillor Kelly was putting forward. But if it's about the enforcement of the actual agreements that we're putting forward and the requirements in the bylaw, I suppose enforcement is always going to be an issue and a concern. And it would largely be based on a complaint basis, and we would, investigate upon the receipt of a complaint. But again, Mr. Pink, you maybe want to jump in here.
Mr. Pink.
Your Worship, through you. I think admittedly, defining a main and accessory use can be somewhat subjective. The zoning bylaw definition refers to the main use or the accessory use, being subordinate, incidental, and completely accessory to. I think in this case, what we would look for, I wouldn't base the main use and the secondary use predominantly on the website, but I would certainly look to Mr. Fahner to provide some background on why the website may not reference a marina use. But from our perspective, the way we've crafted the bylaw, it's clear that a marina use will have to be operated. And we've defined what that means by way of dockage, boat storage, potentially boat sale and repair. As to whether that's the main use and the accessory and the housekeeping units are accessory or vice versa, I think admittedly in this case, as long as both are operating, I don't think we would really have grounds really to do much unless the marina was minimized such to an extent that it was clearly a resort, and we could definitively prove that in a court of law. I think the applicants have agreed to a certain number of slips, and that's thankfully rather easy to enforce and administer. We'll ensure that that dockage is there and available to those members of the public. Hopefully that answers the enforcement question, but I think it was specifically in regards to the staff quarters. I suppose, again, if staff could collect enough evidence to show that the what is meant to be staff quarters is being rented out to the traveling and vacationing public, and we had evidence to that effect, we could pursue compliance with the owner and ensure that it's being used for staff quarters only. But as with all enforcement matters, the difficult part lies in collecting sufficient evidence to definitively prove. The onus falls on the municipality to prove that in court, that it's not being used in accordance with the zoning bylaw. So we would have to somehow demonstrate that it's a housekeeping unit and not staff quarters.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Fahner, do you want to add anything in particular before I go to Councillor Edwards?
No, I believe Mr. Pink has answered it very, very well in that case. I think one of the things to note is I'm really hopeful that councillors haven't heard any recent complaints, and I think that's one thing. my client has indicated to me that he is dealing with a number of customers. He's met with them, and those 24 slips, in fact, he fully intends on having full for this coming season for water access people. So unless you've been hearing complaints rather recently, you know, that's what he's indicated to me. I'm not sure he was hoping to be on this particular call, but we were delayed by an hour, so I'm not sure if he's able to make it or not. But that's certainly what he's indicated to me, and I fully anticipate that he's going to have those docks in. They are, well, most of them are floating docks. They do get taken out. That he will have those in. Those docks are all piled up on shore, and those docks will be in for business this year. So that's what he's indicated to me.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Edwards. Alan, you are still muted.
Thank you very much. And that's through the mayor. I'd like to see the 40 boat slips in that was in your report. Mr. Fahner, you said approximately boat slips. This marina was a full service marina for years. Now they've said that they may not have fuel, they may not have service, and they'll have boat slips. It shouldn't be less than what was there. And by Mr. Fahner saying 40 boat slips, approximately 40 boat slips, and the mayor had said 80%, so 32 should be for the islanders, and the other 8 for other. I did have one email that somebody said that those docks should not be for the rental cottages that are there and that. But you know, the original owner lived where they want to put the staff now. They're asking for extra, and that benefits on that lot with reduced service. And I think it should be at least the 40 docks in there. I'm not going to say you have to sell fuel or anything else like that, but at least it should be what it was before. Thank you.
I'm going to actually go to staff on that particular one because we got to the number of 24 in our planning committee meeting. I'm not sure how or where from a 40 or a 32 is coming into play right now. Mr. Sharp, did you want to comment on that? And then maybe Mr. Fahner to clarify.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe the number 24 is coming from the total number of dock slips that are available. So I think the agreement was 75% would be available to landowners on Skeleton Lake. So I believe there's 33 docks and parking spaces in total. Mr. Fahner can correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you.
Okay, to Mr. Fahner, is there 33 or is there 40?
Well, if I could, the 40 customers also included rental accommodation too, and that was based on half a dozen anyways. So he's got 33 slips there. He has and that's from the old building location survey. He has another dock that services the rental people. So that would bring, that would have brought it up to 39, or rounding it off to 40. The thing is, in reality, unfortunately, with the letter that he has put out, he has lost customers. But we took it as the 33 that was used for the marina operation, and we took basically 75% of that, gives you 24. So that's how we came up with that number. And we thought, I spoke to staff as well as my client, and we thought that was reasonable given the situation, and he certainly will have those docks in place for this coming year.
Okay, Councillor Edwards, you don't look satisfied with that comment. I think the only concern would be if we put more in there, it might present some problems at this point, but Councillor Edwards?
Well, the thing is this, by Mr. Fahner's report, there was 40 docks, and you had said 80%. Now it's gone down to 75% of 32, and that there should be at least 32 for islanders. And if he wants to take some of the other ones out from the other, but they should be at least, and that we were looking this morning at all kinds of docking and that we would have to provide. And I think being a marina, it should be for the islanders. A lot of those people in the past have had letters from that marina saying that they could have dockage and that, and I still will not support anything less. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Fahner, just clarity again in this particular case, because I think the 32 slips, 33 slips we talked about was on the Marina portion. We really didn't calculate in the other rental slips, if you will, for the accommodation units. I would tend to agree. I think call it 75, 80%, whatever the number is, appropriately allocated, that the cottagers, island access people would have a priority slip over a tenant renting the mainland cottage. If that number just was amended up to 30, is that an appropriate number for you that would represent roughly 75% of the 40?
If that's required by council, then certainly it's in your hands. You know, that's what it's going to be if it's going to be 30. But you know, he can have that docking there anyways. This year, of course, it may not be full, but at least the docking would be available anyways.
I think that's appropriate. Mr. Sharp, just point of clarity, because I see, again, I'm looking to our Ward B councillor in particular in this case. Is there an issue if we were to amend that from number 24 to 30 in your point?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
Thanks.
We will, I believe, just committee, are we okay to move that number to 30? Generally speaking, getting a nodding of heads. Thank you. Councillor Jagowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Probably through you to staff. I'm looking at a section 1II of the bylaw, where it is defining the permitted marine use. And that's a very confusing statement. It's a long sentence, probably made up of 100 words. And it says that certain things must, in other words, 24 boat slips must be made available. And then it says where boats are stored, serviced, where boats are stored, serviced, or repaired, and then where the sale of fuel and other things may be provided. And it to me doesn't, it becomes almost not a definition. It's kind of like a story. I just wonder if that could be clearer as to what constitutes the operation of a marina, or is it just my reading of it that's faulty? Maybe you could comment.
Mr. Sharp, Mr. Pink's going to jump in on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will take the heat for that. I apologize. It admittedly is a bit of a run-on sentence. I'm happy to make that a little more clear. If council is in agreement, we can make that change. I don't believe it would be a minor amendment. We can change that wording so that it's two clear sentences as opposed to a run-on sentence.
And probably maybe the definition should be in brackets or something, so you know where the definition begins and ends, and the rest of it is just fluff, you know. Yeah, thank you.
I think the appropriate way is to provide the clear definition of a marina and a separate sentence that clearly stipulates the number of slips that need to be made available to those owners on Skeleton Lake, as opposed to we try to combine that into one run-on sentence. So we're happy to make that change.
And then you're saying it cannot include the rental of commercial houseboats. So you got a whole bunch of thoughts in there. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Zan.
Thank you, and through you, a couple of things. First of all, Councillor Jagowitz was looking at the same section I was, which is a long definition. And I think I'm trying to now understand the difference between how would we constitute a marina versus a landing? Because when I'm looking at this application, it's a landing. And unless there are some different services that are being available. So I think it's important for us as council, this is not going to be the first time, to understand exactly what is if that's the permitted use. Those should be some services that are available. So I think I would like to have some further clarity on that piece. And then the second thing, I think I heard from Councillor Edwards. I was trying to follow the chain on the numbers there, but I believe he was suggesting 40 was the appropriate number of dock slips, and somehow we've landed at 30. So I do, I'm trying to follow the numbers here. This is a critical and viable part to Skeleton Lake into the community. And I applaud the applicant for trying to bring life to an important piece of there. And I do want to help them. it's not our job to make a business viable. So there's lots of kind of confusing pieces to this. I'm still not satisfied with exactly where we're at. So I guess the first thing is, how do we define between a marina and a landing? And second of all, how do we go from 24 to what I heard Councillor Edwards asking for was 40 back down to 30? Thanks.
Mr. Sharp, I see your camera on.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Mazan, for your questions. The definition that we included in the revised draft bylaw is largely the definition that's already contained in our zoning bylaw with respect to marinas. It's just being altered or refined to be more specific with respect to this particular property, for example, through the inclusion of a minimum number of boat slips. I would advise that the waterfront landing is specifically defined in the zoning bylaw as well. And it's defined as the use of land, parking vehicles, and storing boats which facilitate access by persons to one or more residential properties to which access is gained by water. I think the key distinction is the commerciality, I guess, if you want to call it that, of the two operations. So a marina is largely a commercial enterprise, whereas a waterfront landing is private. Mr. Pink may wish to elaborate. And with respect to your question about the number of boat slips, it was our understanding coming into this meeting that there were a total of 30 docks, and 75% of that was 24, which is how we arrived at 24 dock slips. I'm hearing from Mr. Fahner now that there's more docks, so there's 40 docks. So I believe Mayor Harding had suggested that 75% of that is 30. So that's where we've arrived at the number of 30. And I think the suggestion is to include minor amendments that would reflect that in the bylaw that's in front of you today. Thank you.
Okay. Not seeing other comments or questions right now. I have read the resolution for first and second reading. So I'm going to call that. I'll come back to it, Councillor Edwards, if I may, or do you have another question on first and second? We can deal with it, I think, at minor amendments perspective. So on first and second, all those in favor? And anyone opposed? Madam Clerk, we're carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Sharp or Ms. Darling, I'm not sure who, from a minor amendment perspective, the minor amendments associated with this were to impose a minimum 400-foot setback from the high water mark for new buildings and structures, that no new docks and that dock not be permitted on the property. And then the other change that we just talked about, that at minimum 30 boat slips and parking spaces must be made available to the owners of land on Skeleton Lake. Those would be the minor amendments. Do we have anything else that would be required, Mr. Sharp?
Your Worship, I believe you may be reading the resolution for Brent. Yep, no problem. I'd be happy to run through the minor amendments if you wish.
Oh, my mistake. Might be 3. Hold on. I had a page wrong. Go for it. Minor amendments.
Okay, so minor amendments. A minor amendment to permit the proposed accessory dwelling unit in the second story of the boathouse only at which times a marina is in operation on the property. To permit staff quarters in the existing accessory dwelling unit only at which times a marina is in operation on the property. To provide a definition of staff quarters for the purpose of the subject property. To provide a definition of marina for the purpose of the subject property, and to require a minimum number of a minimum amount of docking. So I believe we had indicated 24, and I believe we're going to enshrine the number of 30 in the bylaw where applicable now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Edwards first, then Councillor Kelly.
Yes, thank you very much. I still say that if you check the minutes or the recording of last month's meeting, it was 80% of 40, which would be 32. And he has the other, as Mr. Fahner said, he does have other docking there for the cottages. It's more of the cottages. I can go with 32. I can go with if he has marine fuels and lubricants and service and that. then it is a marina. And as long as it's a marina, I can support it. But I think from the mayor's comments last month, it was 80%, which was 32. And I think if anybody else was listening at the last meeting, I think that's what was said. And it was right in Mr. Fahner's report of 40 docks. That's how I come up with 32. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. This is just a question. The way, admittedly, the draft bylaw was put to us in the package, it says a minimum of 24 boat slips on parking spaces. Is it 24 boat slips and 24? Are we talking about cars and boats? Are we talking about? I just don't really know whether we're splitting the 24 between two or whether we're prescribing a number of car parking spaces or what we're doing with that.
Okay, so I think the question is the number's 30 or 32, depending on
Sorry, right, yeah.
Particular time.
Whatever
that number is. Mr. Sharp, did you want to comment on the bylaw?
Yeah, just as a point of clarity, thank you. And I think the idea is it's just to require a parking space for every boat slip to ensure that occurs on the property. So that's just the intention. Thank you.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Kelly?
It does.
24 and 24, theoretically, or 30 and 30 and 32
Yeah,
and 30.
right. I don't think that's what this says, but that's what we're trying to accomplish. So,
okay. Councillor Mazan.
Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, the definition then of the marina, it will be to include the oils and boat accessories, etc. Correct? Like to ensure the commerciality of the marina. I just want to make sure that it's good, that this is not just going to be a landing, because I believe I just heard from Mr. Sharp that the difference potentially between a landing and a marina is commerciality. So, and the fact that the gas pump is gone or maybe gone, it could be quickly a slippery slope. So I just want to make sure that the language is in there, that it has to be a marina, which includes these elements that are included in this definition. And to Councillor Jaglowicz's point, just that, like, making sure that that language is very clear.
Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Mazan. I think with respect to the commerciality, I think that would largely be accomplished, if nothing else, just through the provision of dock spaces to residents on Skeleton Lake and the rental of those dock slips. I think to require the sale of marine fuels and lubricants, that may be a bit onerous. Just putting myself in the owner's shoes, what if I decide not to sell either of those things on the property? Does that mean I'm not a marina? I don't think it does. But I think, I'm satisfied that there'll be a commercial component to this. Thank you.
Thank you. As a supplemental, if I may, I am a bit uncomfortable with that based upon what I heard as being the definition between a landing and a marina. I grew up on an island. Let me tell you, when you're in a pickle, you need to know that you have access to some of these things. So I don't know that that's onerous or not. And perhaps I could hear from some of my other colleagues and those who have sat around the table longer. I'm going to do what I can currently to protect the commerciality and the operating use of a marina. In this particular case, there's only 2 on this lake, and it's a critical resource. So I think there is a big difference between a landing and a marina. Thank you.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Through you. I just wanted to explain why I'm voting against this. I don't believe that this is going to be a marina. I don't believe that it's actually staff's role to determine whether it's viable or not, whether they're going to sell oil or anything like that. The point is, we went through this situation. In fact, many of you might remember Newark Marina, and eventually it became Pride Marina, and they tried to do a condo type situation with the docks. That was through Gravenhurst, but it was very interesting to sit through because in fact, it was becoming that there was not going to be a marina on Lake Muskoka. that a marina that had been there for many, many years would not be there any longer for the traveling public. Because there's also that aspect too, right? Like it's a marina is more than just selling a couple of cans of oil. And I would hate the fact that somebody could just stick, a few of those items out there, but it is the service, it is all the things that we discussed what a marina is. I don't believe that our staff have the ability to inspect or check it out or do whatever we want to do to say, no, it's actually a resort. I think we as a council should be very protective of our marinas. Down zoning, and to me, turning into a residential, whether it's a resort type of residential or not, trying to put another use as the primary use for marina is not, I don't believe, the direction that we should be going in. And again, I have to vote against this because I don't see anything but something that we can't manage as a municipality.
Okay. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. I was just going to ask for further clarification on the number of docks. And when there was reported to be 30 docks, it was at 80%, so that's 24. But then when it went to 39 or 40, it dropped down to 75%, which was 30. So I'm just following the math and wondering, following what Councillor Edwards had mentioned, if it is 39 or 40, then it should be 32 docks available for Islanders, because it was at 80% when we started.
Okay, agreed. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now starting to become very uncomfortable with this whole definition also. The problem when you go to define something, it can work both ways. If you define it, it can override then the understood definition of an operating marina. So if there's going to be a definition, it has to be very clear. It contains all the elements that are required for this to be a commercial marina operation. And if it's not going to be that, I don't think I can support it. When I heard Manager Sharp just speak a minute ago, that upset me because what he defined that this would be is a landing. He said that the commerciality is the provision of docks to Islanders. Well, I don't consider that to be a marina. But in the motion that's in front of us, it's my understanding, it talks about a clear definition of a marina. So I think there's latitude for staff to work on that and make it clear. But I would want assurance from staff that they're going to be satisfied this is a commercial marina. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go to Councillor Zavitz, and then I've got a path forward. I see Councillor Mazan, but I may come back to you. Councillor Zavitz first.
Thank you. Through you. I'm just sitting back listening here. Of course, Councillor Jaglowitz just used my word, which was assurances. I'm watching Mr. Fahner keep his head down and jot notes. Mr. Fahner, it surprises me, I guess, a little bit that the dialogue you're hearing shows that this council truly does care of what this place is intended to actually be. I wonder if you could speak to no one else but you. Could you speak to what it is your client truly expects? I mean, we're talking to each other about what we'd like to see. Let's hear from you here and now as to what this place is really going to be. Because you can see that some people aren't going to support this if it's a landing. I certainly won't be.
Mr. Fahner, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure at this point what I'm going to say, if anybody's going to believe me anyways, but the thing is that he has indicated to me that he's going to be running and operating a marina. And I'll be quite frank and blunt that, if he doesn't get some sort of assistance here and, you want to shut him down, yeah, you'll shut down the marina. So I think, you at least have to give him an opportunity to do what he says he's going to do, and that is to operate a marina. And I fully agree with staff that there is certainly the commerciality point of a marina versus a waterfront landing. One of the key things, I think anyways, one of the differences as well is the fact that boats are stored on site. You don't see that at waterfront landings. That's certainly a key thing. People need to have their boats stored on site. And he he has boat storage buildings. They're fairly old in that, but he definitely stores boats on the property. So that's one key thing that I know that definitely happens on that property. But I'm really getting concerned that no one's going to believe what he wants to do, and now he's committed to the operation, and you're going to end up with a marina that is going to shut down. I hate to say, and I think that's going to be really, really difficult and really sad. But at least give him the opportunity. I don't think there's any other marina in the municipality that's making a commitment to provide boat slips for water access people in the same extent as what's being defined in this bylaw. He's going beyond what you would have in terms of restrictions at any other marina in the municipality. And he's willing to go along with that. So, I think you really have to be careful here. And as the discussion I had with the gentleman at Lakeshore Marina, who has staff quarters on site as well as an owner's dwelling, he says it's extremely beneficial to the operation to have that particular situation. And that's really what this application is about. He's applying to put a dwelling in the boathouse. He's not applying for additional docks. He's not doing anything in that respect, but he's going along and added restrictions are being put in, and he's agreeing to that. And so anyways, I really truly believe that he's going to be operating a marina next year. And but I think he needs the opportunity to, and I'm not hearing a lot of encouragement, unfortunately.
Okay, I see Councilor Mazan and Councilor Roberts have your hands up. If I can ask you just to pause for a moment. What I've heard this discussion is that we need some more clarity on what I'll call the definition of a marina and how it operates, which I think is section 2 of the bylaw, number 1.2. There was some confusing language in there that Mr. Pink thought that he could solve. I think we need some clarity on the 80%. We're confirmed that there are 40 docks on the entire property. So does that number become 32, which it does, and just maybe staff can double check that, and any other little tweaks or minor amendments specifically. Mr. Pink or Mr. Sharp, if you're okay, and council, I'm going to recommend that we take a 5-10 minute break, because we've been going at this for about an hour and 15 minutes. Not this particular, but all of this. And we'll let staff come back to us with some specifics that we can discuss either as minor amendments or how we may want to proceed going forward. I think, Mr. Fahner, just to help ease your client, there are a number of councillors around this table that are in favor of providing access to island or land access, water access only properties. Just trying to find the appropriate balance so that this doesn't turn into a commercial resort, or I'll use the words Airbnb, which is not appropriate, but along those lines, just using the waterfront to gain access and eventually ignoring the cottagers who do rely on the parking facilities of this marina. So I think that's all that's really going on. So I think you can hopefully let your client know that we are committed to that. Mr. Sharp, Mr. Pink, are you okay just to take sort of 10 minutes yourselves and try and provide some clarity for us going forward? We got a thumbs up from Mr. Sharp. Councillor Roberts, quick comment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I grabbed I opened the official plan, the new revised official plan, E48, Marina Development Redevelopment. And in there, it does talk about what a marina might be. It doesn't talk about gas. It doesn't talk about parking boats. I then flipped over to section E31 on the definitions of resort. And resorts are defined as commercial establishments that A, B, C, D, E. We need this type of thing for a marina. So next week when we do the official plan, we really got to take a hard look at the loose words we have in marina and tighten them up. We need to have this boat storage or this dockage for Skeleton Lake this year. I appreciate my other councillors and they're concerned, but we're going to totally screw and forget. I'm sorry for saying that word. A lot of people on Skeleton Lake, if we put this business on hold. So please consider that when you vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So council, we're going to take 10 minutes at this point, and we're going to let Mr. Sharp and Mr. Pink see what they can come back with us to try and answer all of our questions. So thank you, 10 minutes. Okay, council, we'll get you to join us back in here. Apologize for the delay, but we had some discussion with Mr. Pink, who had discussion with Mr. Sharp. Try and summarize where we are at. Zavitz is back. There we go. Just missing Councilor Nishikawa. Hopefully she can hear us in the background. Can everybody hear me? There we go. Thank you. So where we're at, there was some discussion, and just to summarize where we were before the break. It's important, Director Pink reminded me to sort of back up to where we were 30 days ago. There was significant concern on Skeleton Lake that this marina would cease to exist, and there would be a number of water access only properties displaced that couldn't be managed by the other single marina on the lake. That in itself was problematic. So we got to where we were today. Part of that discussion was among making sure and ensuring that a certain percentage number, 25, 30%, 80%, 20%, or sorry, 80 or 75% of the boat slips would always be available to islanders or water access properties, which is where we were able to change the number. We realized today there's 40 boat slips. So 80% of that is the number 32. We can reflect that accordingly in a revised bylaw. The bylaw was written with some flexibility. And again, Mr. Pink confirmed this to me, that the non-flexible nature of this is it's a marina, that it must offer slips available to islanders and or water access people. The flexibility was I can sell ice cream or chips I could repair or not repair, because the concern in the past was if, and I think Mr. Fahner stated that at the beginning of this meeting, if we mandate that, the marina may cease to exist as a marina and we go no further forward. We are back at square zero and we don't really have a solution for the 25 slips of people who utilize this on Skeleton Lake at this particular point. So we do have a number of minor amendments, the one to change to 32. The question I want to put to council at this particular time is, do we want, and we are able to be very prescriptive in this bylaw, to insist that they sell lubricants, to insist that they service boats on site, to insist a number of things. But does that unduly, we don't do that with any other marina in the township. So, but a couple of people were concerned about the viability, the commerciality of the marina. And I'm just going to turn it over to council. If anybody really feels strongly that this bylaw needs to be written, that we tell a marina how to operate as a marina, or are we trying to protect water access? And I'll leave it to that at this point before I go to a minor amendments. Anybody want to chime in? Nobody wants to stick their neck out. Councillor Jaglowitz.
I'd just like to ask you a question, Mr. Chair. If this marina is providing substitutes, by the way, I agree with basically what you said, but the concern is they're requesting to have a second staff quarters to house a full-time staff person, supposedly to operate the marina, if they're only selling chips. So, yeah, but I do agree. We can't be that prescriptive. But for my sake, it has to, like, this reminds me of the resort issue that Councillor Roberts brought up. You know, are you allowed to use a resort property as your residence? And I think it's the same thing. So I'm comfortable if staff can put in a reasonable definition of what an operating marina should be, then that would satisfy me. Thank you.
And I think we do already have that, if I may. And I think we've heard from our staff that they are going to, if there's no staff working at the marina, then that residence would not be allowed to be used because it's a staff residence. So, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you, just I absolutely agree. We cannot be prescriptive in terms of what constitutes a marina or this marina. I think I made this point last time around that we cannot be telling anybody how to run their business. The flip side of the coin is in order for us to get comfortable enough to approve this application, we have to believe, the way it's drafted, that the main permitted use of this property is that of a marina. And failing that, as Councillor Jaglowitz said a minute ago, how do we approve the construction of staff quarters if there's no marina to put people in? And that's been my point from this morning. That's why I raised the website. I don't see much evidence of a marina. And the word's not used once on the website. So I'm struggling to understand how we can classify what's happening here as a marina being the main permitted use that would justify the construction of the next building. That's where I just get stuck there. I think it's a viable, I don't want to use the word resort because they don't use it, but it's a viable rental accommodation place that happens to have dock space and parking for boaters. And maybe that's good enough, but I think it's when we start trying to classify that activity as the main permitted use and that being a marina where I start to fall apart.
Okay. So council, and I'm going to get Director Pink maybe to chime in on this. There are two minor amendments that would be considered. One of them is permitting an accessory dwelling unit, which is sort of germane of this whole discussion, in the second story of a boathouse, only at which times the marina is in operation on the property. So it can only be that if the marina is in operation. Secondary, permit accessory staff quarters in the existing accessory dwelling unit, only at which times the marina is operation on the property, and to provide corresponding definition of staff quarters for the purpose of the subject property. So we're asking staff to, as clearly as possible, define this at this particular point. In the bylaw is a draft, but it would be based on our input, revised, modified, and adjusted accordingly before it's done. But those two caveats that say as a marina, it's an accessory use, and that's the only time. Otherwise, it's still just generally a building, and they can't use it as staff quarters unless they've got a marina operation as defined by a marina. So anybody have any issues with that, or I'm going to potentially read the minor amendment and we can talk accordingly. Okay, I'm going to go back, and I also, just because I made a comment, I think I read the Brent at the beginning, so I'm going to just rewind slightly here. Moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. My apologies. Be resolved that bylaw 2021-189 this time to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 1099756 Ontario Inc. Rule 2865 be read a first and second time. So first and second reading on this. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Unopposed. That's carried. Thank you. So I'm going to go now to the minor amendments and just pay close attention as we read this. Moved by Councillor Everett, seconded by Councillor Jagowitz. Be it resolved that the Township Council amend bylaw 2021-189 1099756 Ontario Inc. These amendments are minor in nature and do not require further public circulation. Hereby approved prior to third reading. These amendments shall consist of: number one, permitting the accessory dwelling unit in the second story of a boathouse only at which times a marina is in operation on the property. Number two, permit accessory staff quarters in the existing accessory dwelling unit only at which time a marina is in operation on the property, and to provide a corresponding definition of staff quarters for the purposes of the subject property. And number three, provide a definition of marina use on the property, which includes a requirement for 32 boat slips to be made available to landowners on Skeleton Lake. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Jagowitz?
Yes, just a clarification. I believe the director agreed that he would clean up the wording of the definition of marina, because the way that reads, it almost sounds like the definition of marina is providing boat slips. So he will just clean it up to make sure it's
thank you. And I think
like a marina. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not so much a minor amendment, Mr. Pink. When you actually prepare the final bylaw, you will try and flesh out that language a little bit. Just trying to wait and see if Mr. Pink's camera comes on. Mr. Pink?
Thank you, Worship. I've already done that. It's a rather simple reformatting of the definition, we can make that change. It wouldn't be a necessary minor amendment. Keep in mind, we just crafted a bylaw for your help and assistance, as we thought council would appreciate the review of it. But the minor amendment before you would dictate what should be included, and staff can make that change accordingly if this resolution is approved.
Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for the 32 boat slips. When you said owners of that, was that on only accessible by water? As it was previously was?
The minor amendment talks about landowners on Skeleton Lake, but it would be included similar, and I think Director Pink knows enough. It's basically just specifying that the number is 32, not 24. I think that's the
no, yeah. Well, the thing was, what basically the old one said, made available to owners of land on Skeleton Lake where it's only accessible by water.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will add the word water access landowners on Skeleton Lake.
Thank you.
Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Now that we're into the details, could we make sure we say 32 slips and 32 corresponding parking spots, just to cover that off?
Done. Okay, so that now reads, provide a definition of marine use in the property, which includes a requirement to be made available to water access landowners on Skeleton Lake, or sorry, for 32 boat slips and corresponding car spots to be made available to water access landowners on Skeleton Lake. Covers both those. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we are carried. Thank you very much. Third and final reading, moved by Councillor Zabit, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-189, 1099756 Ontario Inc. be read a third time and finally passed. Any comments? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Fahner, there we go. Hopefully we didn't encumber your client too much, and there's some flexibility whether or not they sell chips or popcorn or Reese peanut butter cup chocolate bars. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Thank you. Okay. Now can I go back to read?
Yeah, go back.
We're going to go back to read, which I think you just took my resolutions.
Nope, these are the ones you signed.
I know, but there's already a pre-signed one that I'm going to read again.
Brent,
not read.
here.
There we go. 9B2. My apologies. We don't have any delegations on this particular one. I'm just going to read, moved by Councillor Edwards, second by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-162 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 Brent Rule 6515 be read a first and second time for the first and second time. All those in favor? That one is carried. Thank you very much. But what I'm missing is any minor amendments. There we go.
Brent, third and final time.
Any minor amendments, Ms. Darling, on this particular one?
There's two minor amendments. The first is for the minimum permitted setback of 400 feet from the high water mark to be imposed for new buildings. And the second is to prohibit a dock on the property.
Right. I'm just trying to find that resolution because I screwed it up here. Here we go. Minor amendments, moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved the Township Council amend bylaw 2021-162 Brent. And these amendments are minor in nature, do not require further public circulation, and hereby approved prior to third reading. These amendments shall consist of imposing a minimum 400-foot setback from the high water mark for new buildings and structures, and that the dock not be permitted on the property. Councillor Nishikawa.
I'm just wondering if it could be added that that includes floating docks, because that was a concern of the neighbor for sure. And as I mentioned before, the situation on Lake Rosso that we had at District, that in fact it was floaters that created the problem. So I think that that should be included.
Mr. Sharp or Mr. Pink, I don't believe we define a dock. A dock is a dock, whether it's fixed or floating. I think all counts the same. But would you like some greater clarity in this minor amendment in this particular case? Because I don't believe council wants any form of a dock. Mr. Sharp?
It's an interesting question. I think that ultimately we would consider a floating dock a dock, but if we wanted to include wording for extra clarity, certainly wouldn't be opposed to that. Thank you.
Okay, so I've changed the word to these amendments shall consist of imposing a minimum 400-foot setback from the high water mark for new buildings and structures, and that a dock, floating or fixed, not be permitted on the property. Should cover us off. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe we should put the word raft in there, because if it's not attached to shore, it's basically a raft. We had that off our property on the Moon River. I believe that a resort, we're putting rafts out there. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification for Mr. Sharp, because waterways are MNR, and someone is to stick a raft in the middle of the lake. I don't believe we have any jurisdiction over that, do we? I know we do when it affixes and attaches to our shoreline, but if that dock is or raft is to be floating in the middle of the lake, I don't believe it's our property that we would have jurisdiction. Mr. Sharp or Mr. Pink?
Thank you, Worship. Interesting question. I suppose the scenario that I'm envisioning is someone with a floating raft that's associated with their property, and my consideration would be that that floating raft or dock, if you want to call it that, would need to comply with the zoning bylaw, 66 feet in length with side yard setbacks. Thank you. Hopefully that was clear.
Well, I'm not sure if that answers. If somebody is to anchor a 10 by 10 raft 20 feet from shore, do we have jurisdiction on a 10 by 10 raft 20 feet from shore? I think is the question.
I believe we do, yes. I would consider that a dock, and I believe it would need to comply with the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw. It may also require a permit from the province as well. Thank you.
So a raft is floating, would be considered in the same dock raft perspective. Covered off. Councillor Jagowitz?
I think with all respect, then if you read it again, you'll see it says a floating raft on the property. I don't think that word's appropriate. On or in front of or something, or I don't know. Or not in front of, because that's the rear. It's just
the language
floating dock on the property. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I see, Mr. Pink, it says, and that a dock, floating or fixed, not be permitted on the property.
So how can you have a floating dock on the property? It would be in the water. So why do you have to say on the property? Or maybe say a fixed dock on the property, and I don't know. I'm just trying to say.
Mr. Pink, and I'm just counsel. We're talking about an ultimate bylaw that Mr. Pink and our planning staff would be working legally, and I think the implied goes a long way versus the words in this particular case. But Mr. Pink.
Through you, Your Worship, I don't believe there needs to be any specification in the minor amendment. We've always interpreted our zoning bylaw definition of a dock to include permanent dock structures, including floating dock structures. I may take the opportunity just to correct Mr. Sharp. I don't believe we've always operated under the impression that we don't have the authority to regulate floating rafts or other floating toys. You may recall previous discussions at Planning Committee in the past few years where community members have expressed concern with trampolines, slides of that nature, and they were exploring gaining authority to control that through provincial authorities, not the township. So I don't believe we need to specify rafts in this bylaw. We would not have authority to regulate that. I think you can simply state dock, and it will cover permanent, however that dock is constructed correctly. Thank you.
Okay. Council, you've heard the minor amendment. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, that's carried. Thank you very much. Third and final reading. Moved by Councillor Jagowitz, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-162 Brent be read a third time and finally passed. Any comments? All those in favor? That too is carried. Let's kind of keep going through some of these planning applications. Watson application. I'm going to go right ahead with first and second, and then we'll have staff make any comments. Moved by Councillor Roberts, second by Councillor Mazan. Be resolved that bylaw 2021-196 Watson Rule 42631, being a bylaw to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14, be read a first and second time. First and second for Watson. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any minor amendments to our planning staff? Ms. Walker?
No, there's no minor amendments for this bylaw.
No minor amendments. Going to third reading, moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-196 Watson be read a third time and finally passed. Final questions or final opportunity for questions? All those in favor? That one's carried. Thank you very much. Let's move on to Goldstein. I'll go to first and second, moved by Councillor Edwards, second by Councillor Zabitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-204 Goldstein and Glede Goldstein, Rule 42395-2, being a bylaw to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14, be read a first and second time. All those in favor? First and second. That one is carried. Thank you. Mr. Sharp, I see your camera's turned on. Do we have any minor amendments required for this?
Thank you, Your Worship. There are no minor amendments.
Okay. Third and final, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021 Goldstein, Glede Goldstein, be read a third time and finally passed. I'll ask any comments, questions. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, I think we have some other management reports, and I'm for some reason missing. Yeah, I don't know why I'm missing them.
You took your
I jumped
file
them.
and put it in half.
I jumped ahead because we got into our planning. Okay, some shore road allowance. Let's back up here to item 8A. Surplus land, Ferguson and Rogers. We've got a number of these. I'm just going to turn to staff and any comments or questions that we need to be attended, or I can probably just go right ahead and read them. Maybe a thumbs up from staff. Oh, wait here we go. Rochelle, we're thumbs up on that point. There we go. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that a portion of closed flooded original shore road allowance on Lake Muskoka lying in front of concession 10 lot 27 Monk, designated as part 3 on plan 35R 26334 Ferguson Rogers Rule 911 64 be declared as surplus land, and that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of said property pursuant to sections 8, 9, 11 of Municipal Act 2001 and further bylaw 2022-19 to convey that portion of closed flooded original shore road allowance designated as part 3 on 35R 26334 be given 3 readings and passed. Any comments? All those in favor? That one is carried. Thank you. Next one, moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that a portion of original shore road allowance on 3 Mile Lake lying in front of concession 7 lot 15 Watt designated as part 1 plan 35R 26649 Van Boxtel Rule 21681 be declared as surplus land, and that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of said property pursuant to sections 8, 9, 11 of the Municipal Act 2001, and further that a bylaw 2022-2020 be to stop up, close, and convey that portion of original shore allowance designated as part 135R 26649 be given 3 readings and passed. Any comments? All those in favor? Carried again. Thank you very much. Here we go. Third and final, moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that a portion of original shore allowance on Brandy Lake lying in front of concession 133 Watt designated parts 1 and 2 on plan 35R 26694 Vandersvelt Rule 2633 be declared as surplus land, and that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of said property pursuant to section 8, 9, 11 of Municipal Act 2001. Further bylaw 2022-27 to stop up, close, and convey a portion of original shore road allowance designated as parts 1 and 2 35R 26694 be given 3 readings and passed. All those in favor? Carried. And that one is carried. Moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-17 to stop up close a portion of Township Colonization Road laying in front of Concession 1, Part 26 Watt, designated as Part 2 on Plan 35R 26641, be given 3 readings and passed. Any questions on this? Comments from staff? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Got a bylaw here. I'm not sure if we want some comment on this. 9A5. Corporate seal license agreement, black. Staff, maybe just any comments on what the license agreement's for? Any issues with this? Where are we going? Rochelle?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This license agreement is for the encroachment of a existing dwelling that is situated on a portion of Township Road Allowance. This report and related bylaw is just to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the license agreement.
Okay, thank you for that. I apologize for not muting. You might have had some echo in the room. Moved by Councillor Jagowitz, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-32 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix a corporate seal to a license agreement between the corporation of the Township of Muskoka Lakes and Gerald Bernard Black and Irene Black, given 3 readings and finally passed. All those in favor? That one's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to some tenders. I think we're going to Director of Public Work, supply 2 half-ton pickup vehicles. Director Becking.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation is to award to the lowest compliant bidder. With respect to this, both this report and the one to follow, we're seeing a lot of increases in costs as a result of supply chain issues with many of our suppliers, and I will be bringing forward a report to council next month to give you an update on where things are at and how we plan to proceed.
Thank you. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that council award contract T 2022-5 to Brevet GM for the bid price of $99,500, less than the value of trade-ins, taxes excluded, and that council authorize an amount up to $10,000 to be drawn from the fleet reserve to cover the purchase amount in excess of the amounts previously authorized in 2021 capital budget and 2022 capital budget respectively regarding the procurement, and that Director of Public Works be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the purchase. Any comments? All those in favor?
Good night.
That one's carried. Thank you. Next one, Director Sandham.
Yes, Your Worship. Staff recommendation is to award to Curry's for the purchase of 2 Western Star plow trucks with Viking equipment.
Okay. Resolution moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that council award contract T 2022-03 to Curry Truck Center for the bid price of $621,904, taxes excluded, and that council authorize an amount up to $44,000 to be drawn from the fleet reserve to cover the purchase amount in excess of the amounts previously authorized in the 2022 capital budget regarding this procurement, and that the Director of Public Works be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the purchase. Any further comments? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Becking. I believe we're going to our fire chief to regard some scuba gear, I believe. Am I correct? SCBA, whatever. Sounds like scuba. Self-contained breathing apparatus.
Through you, Your Worship. Thank you. Tenders have been issued and a single bid received for the supply and delivery of self-contained breathing apparatus, air cylinders, and personal issue masks for the fire department. As council is aware, we split this purchase up so that we can accommodate it over a 10-year period. You'll see that we recommend to council M&L Supply be awarded the tender for $129,097.53. And this amount was included in the 2022 emergency services portion of the capital budget with a budget of $132,000. And this will easily accommodate the recommended award. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hayes, second by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that contract T 2021-33 be awarded to M&L Supply Fire and Safety in the amount of $129,097.53, taxes excluded, and that the fire chief be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the purchase. Any comments? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, Chief Bunker Gear, I'm just going to read the resolution so you can stand for questions. Moved by Councillor Edwards, second by Councillor Jankowicz. Be it resolved that contract T 2022-32 be awarded to AJ Stone Company Limited in the amount of $46,000, taxes excluded, and that the fire chief be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the purchase. This is Bunker Gear. Council, any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Chief. I think we're good. Director of Financial Services, where are we here? Mr. Donaldson, comments on our intake fund? Oh, Councillor Jankowicz has got his hand up. My apologies. Sorry, Frank.
No, that's my fault. I was slow on the draw. I wonder if we could go back to G just for a minute. It was the purchase of the 2 trucks. And I just was asked just a quick question. I noticed that we didn't select the low tender. I just wonder if there was an explanation. There were 2 tenders lower. I was just curious why we didn't select the low tender.
Director Becking, do you want to explain the differences between trucks?
Certainly, Your Worship. The Western Star was recommended for fleet compatibility reasons. It avoids us having multiple spares and replacement parts. In addition to that, it is a vehicle that has much better visibility, so there's a health and safety component to the recommendation. It's more rugged and stands up better and has a better resale value. So the expectation is that it will have the lowest life cycle cost to the corporation.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Council. The report basically is an update. You'll be aware or recall that we received approval for our municipal modernization grant. We submitted a joint proposal with the town of Huntsville. At that time, we had asked Council's authorization to go to RFP for a new accounting system. After doing some marketplace research due to cost and timing, we have changed our plans, and the town of Huntsville and ourselves and Muskoka Lakes have opted to work with our current vendor to improve our current application that we have. Some of the notable improvements that we'll have is we will be able to go to an e-billing process, so tax bills can go out electronically rather than being printed and mailed. And then we have other self-serve options that the public will be able to access with respect to tax certificates and statements and so on. We'll also do a business process optimization and improve some of our efficiencies that way, and look at some additional modules around purchasing and fixed assets in order to have better control over our financial businesses within the township.
Okay, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Roberts, second by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that Council authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute an agreement with Central Square Technologies for the provision of licensing and or professional services at a cost up to $200,000, including HST as highlighted in the report entitled Municipal Modernization Funding Intake 2, Update of Municipal Accounting Software, dated March 16th, 2022. Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Director Donaldson. I read the previous report that said that the current application would not be supported by other or facilitate other services or other functionality. And is it just because of costs that and timing that we're going to not go the route of getting what is a more newer version and updating, like it's 10 years old right now. So what do we basically, what are we losing by going with the current software?
Director Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the question, Councillor. So I don't know that we're losing anything. I think the concern we had at the time that we had written that previous report was around Central Square's ongoing support of that particular application. They do have several accounting systems that they sell and that they support. We have confirmed with Central Square that they are continuing to support iCity, which is the product that we use, and that they will be continuing to provide enhancements and benefits for that product. So I don't think that we're going to be losing anything, and I think we actually gain a little bit by not starting over with a new product. We have a product that is used by other municipalities within the district, and also that our staff are familiar with. And that continuity will help. I think we just need to be able to better optimize how we use it to ensure that we're getting the maximum value out of it.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgman, I saw your hand up, but it's been removed. Was your question asked and answered?
Well, I was wondering what we were losing to, Mayor Harding, but Mr. Donaldson, our current supplier, were they part of who we reached out to get a quote?
Director.
So thank you. So sorry, can I clarify the question in terms of who we reached out to for other systems?
Well, yeah, I guess for other systems. I guess I'm following up on Councillor Roberts. Are we going with this because we don't want to lose the grant? I think that's where I am going with that. Rather than have a system that's going to be better serving us 10 years from now.
Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I wouldn't say that this system will last us another 15 years or 10 years, because I think all applications tend to get a little bit antiquated after a while. I think I have better confidence that Central Square Technologies is going to continue to support iCity as opposed to not supporting it. They did provide some quotes for some of their other products. So they do have a Great Plains product that they also sell and support, but the costs were significantly over what we had included in our budget, and certainly more than what was included in the municipal modernization grant that was allotted by the province. So there is some issue with respect to not wanting to exceed our capital budget allocation for 2022, and certainly for eligibility for costs under the program. I think 35-cent dollars are where I was trying to get to as much as possible. So
agreed. Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. I've got a few bylaws to read for site plan control. Moved by Councillor Everett, second by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-39 to designate site plan control a part of Lot 4, Concession 12, Parts 1 to 4, and Part 6, Plan 35R 19-817, Part 2, Plan 35R 23-782, and Parts 10-11, Plan 35R 16585 Watt. 10-99-756 Ontario Inc. Rule 218-65 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Comments on site plan? All those in favor? Should be designated. Hayes, be it resolved that bylaw 2020-40 to deem lot 7 on plan 36 Medora not to be a lot on plan of subdivision. Lorimer, Rule 4-11-72-2 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Comments? All those in favor? Mr. Lorimer no longer has a lot. By Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa, be it resolved that bylaw 2022-43, being a bylaw to regulate the parking of vehicles on Township Muskoka Lakes, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Councillor Hayes has her hand in the air. And then Councillor Edwards.
I thank you. Through you, in the event of an event, having to leave your car overnight, it suggests that by 8 o'clock the next day, your car be removed. Realistically speaking, if you've had to leave your vehicle there, chances are you're not going to be there by 8. That could be changed to noon and still be enforced. And how is this going to handle the overflow parking we've seen with Walker's Point Marina and Bermoras. We have suggested that the people that need to use the community centers for overflow parking. We also suggest to our winter residents that come up that do not have their driveways plowed out that they park at the community center and skidoo back and forth. So I'm just wondering how that works, because it doesn't say anything in the bylaw. It just says no overnight parking.
Director Becking, if you want to handle that one, or I don't see anyone else. Director?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I was distracted. Could the councillor repeat the question?
Councillor
Yeah, I had 2 points. One, if you leave your car at an event, chances are you're not going to return at 8 o'clock in the morning to pick it up. It would probably be closer to noon. So if that could be amended to noon, that would be probably very enforceable. And how are we going to handle the overflow parking that we've indicated for Walker's Point Marina and for the Bermoras group to use our community centers? And also in the winter, we're on Walker's Point, we tell people if you only have your driveway for one car and a buddy shows up, do not park your car on the road in the wintertime. Pick them up at the community center and leave your car there. So how do we handle that? Because basically it says no parking.
Your Worship, with respect to the last issue, if you read on in the bylaw, it actually speaks to or subject to something to the effect of or subject to the signage that's on site. So it's the actual signage that's on site that dictates whether the bylaw needs to be enforced or not. In the case of the community centers, the signage that I've seen, and I must confess, I'm not I don't recall seeing the sign specifically at Walker's Point, but I do know that the one at Milford Bay allows up to 72 hours. And frankly, all the vehicle owner has to do is move the car over one stall and the clock gets reset. So there's ample opportunity there. With respect to the 8 o'clock, I'm an early riser, so that's why it says 8 o'clock. But if council wishes to change that or amend it to 12 noon, I'm quite certain there would be no objections.
Okay, thank you. So I think potentially noon might be a good revision. I think the signage at community centers might handle the other comments. Councillor Edwards?
Thank you. We had 3-hour parking on the roads. And that what happens to the contractors working on islands that have to park if they're near one of our access points. And that it's 6 hours on Saturdays and Sundays, 3 hours during the week. Are we going to penalize contractors on that? And the other one was, I don't know if there's any curbs around, but I don't like 15 centimeters from the curb where you can get a ticket, because very few people park 6 inches from the curb. I know it's just a minor thing, but it is in the bylaw.
Director Becking?
Again, the second issue first, Your Worship. I can attest to council that 6 inches is the standard throughout the province of Ontario.
Right.
And hence the reason why vehicle examiners are so difficult to deal with when it comes to getting your license and parallel parking is because for that very reason. Again, if council wishes to change it to something else, I would, on that one, I would recommend against, because our roads are so narrow. You want vehicles tight to the edge of the roadway. We're talking about 6 inches, but 6 inches counts in this particular instance. With respect to the 3-hour limit, that's in the urban areas, and I wouldn't be unduly concerned about that limitation. It's intended for Port Carling and Bala, particularly during the summer months.
Thank you. Director Beckett, let me just ask a supplemental question to Councillor Edwards. Have we actually ticketed somebody who was 8 inches from the curb necessarily? And I think it really
I
depends.
hope not.
You know, driving a full-size pickup truck, if I'm parked 12 inches from the curb, I'm certainly going to be blocking the live lane of traffic. If I happen to be driving my car, I could probably park 12 inches and still not block traffic.
To the best of my knowledge, Your Worship, I'm not aware of a ticket having ever been issued for that reason, and I do believe that staff tend to use a dose of common sense when applying that, but we don't want people blocking half of the lane. And as sad as it is to say, I have seen situations such as that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I will say this is a difficult bylaw to read and try to jump back and forth. And like, I understand the director saying, well, if you look here, well, that'll be different. Well, it's a very, I'm just very concerned. I'm very concerned about, for instance, a sidewalk versus a raised curb, because anyone that had been on council when Len Troop was our director for 30 years, it seemed like, but we didn't have any curbs in Bala. I'll just say specifically Bala. We didn't have curbs at all. We or what he called raised curbs, part of the road. It was a very different thing. So in fact, many people were, and actually some decisions we made even when we were going with 1414, for instance, I remember this coming up specifically. It's a real challenge for me to actually, I'm sitting there picturing probably 5 businesses in Bala that people are at risk for getting a ticket. And these are just people running in for a coffee because they've parked on the raised curb, which is also the sidewalk. It happens to be 169, but anyhow, that it's not clear to me. Like I don't want to be a municipality that is like, we're already getting to me way too many rules and regulations and everything. And it just really concerns me that we might be sending the wrong message. And yes, we can say, well, we don't think the bylaw is going to be out there. But if it's in writing, we're giving them permission to then start fining people. That's a big concern for me, because I think we're losing the quaintness of Muskoka Lakes, quite honestly. And so that's my concern about 12C. I don't think the 3 hours is a good number. I realize that it's just in Port Carling that you were concerned about, but in fact, it doesn't say just Port Carling, or I didn't read that part. And again, I'm even thinking about a commercial establishment that is being built right now in Bala, that they have to park on both roads. You know, like there's no other place for them to be parking and being close to their work vehicles and everything else. And yet we're really excited about this new business coming to downtown Bala. So I don't want to put stuff in place that is actually going to hinder people. And again, as we always know, some of these bylaws are all about interpretation, and that's what is concerning me. But so 26(1), I guess, is one of my concerns, and certainly 12C.
Okay, I'm just kind of catching up. 26(1).
Oh, and I should also say my biggest problem is that understanding, I think I have a pretty good understanding of the functioning of the summer in Bala in particular. Used to have the understanding when Edenvale was open in Port Carling, but we're a happening town, I will say. We don't expect people to go to bed at midnight, and we also hope that they're going to be leaving their car. And I don't want to restrict the number of hours that they can leave their car. The key is a big driver for this community. And parking, we know there's not a lot of parking in front of the key, but happens that it could be in one of our municipal parking lots, could be Jasmine Park, for instance. Or let's take, for example, the Cranberry Festival. And those activities, we end up having lots of people leave their vehicles overnight and much, not even at noon. I'm really concerned that we don't have a problem. I don't hear that we have a problem now. I certainly have not seen a problem at the Bala and the Torrance community centers, and Walker's Point has actually been very generous in offering up their parking. I just think we might be putting in too many rules that are actually going to affect the way that we do business and we're talking about 8 weeks, really, but it will affect that 8 weeks.
Okay, so I think Councillor Hayes brought up in particular 26.1, and that's 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. I certainly would be in favor of extending that till noon. So if I was out at the Key to Bala and chose to leave my car there, I could pick it up by noon the next day. I'm not sure it's appropriate to leave it for the weekend. I think noon is an appropriate time frame. Anybody else want to provide comment on this bylaw at this particular point? I think this is consolidating a number of things into one bylaw. I think we do want to have some regulations as to how people do park and don't park across the municipality. Otherwise, we might be opening Pandora's box. But Director Beck, you wanted to speak?
I just wanted to speak to Councillor Nishikawa's concerns with respect to sidewalks. The areas that she's referring to do not meet the definition of a sidewalk. A sidewalk is separate and distinct from the travel portion of the roadway. The paved shoulders that she's referring to in Bala specifically are not considered sidewalks and therefore not subject to the provisions of the bylaw, provided that the vehicles are being parked appropriately. A sidewalk is a designated pedestrian space for the exclusive use of pedestrians, and all parking bylaws contain provisions that ensure that people are not allowed to park on top of the dedicated pedestrian space. I agree that with her that it is confusing in Bala because of how the space is configured, and that in fact it's shared. There's similar conditions in Port Carling as well. So, but I think it's important that the space that is designated for the exclusive use of pedestrians needs to be protected.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so I have read the bylaw or the resolution. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, that's carried. And opposed. There we go. Thank you. Councillor Edwards? Alan, you are muted still. Oh, that was just a vote by hand. How are you? I'm good. Thanks. Okay. There we go. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Roberts, second by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-44, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2016-125, being a bylaw to establish and regulate fire department, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any comments on our fire department bylaw? All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Jagowitz, that's a question.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm not opposed to giving our fire people raises, so please don't interpret it that way. I just wondered why we picked March 1st as the date to set the wages for budget purposes. Might it be better if it started the first of the year or something? And then the second one was we're fixing their increase to the same increase for non-unionized employees, which is defined as, I believe, an inflation factor as of August or something. And I just wondered why we have it all double stacked up like that. as opposed to just dealing with it. So I assume you're getting rid of Schedule A because that probably had the increases in it or something. I don't know.
Chief Morrell, want to comment? I also see our HR manager, Ms. Lehman, has turned on her camera. Not sure who wants to handle it.
I'll start because there's a couple pieces there that are pretty crucial that Councillor Jaglowitz mentions through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. Great questions. Thank you, councillor, for paying attention. The reason that we do March 1st is typically because we can set the budget for the new year, and that would give us time to accommodate, because that budget is getting approved by council come November, December, into January, and potentially into February. That's the reason that I was given in the past about the March 1st commencement date of the new raise. Now, the second part of your question, councillor, had to do with why we were bringing this back to council. Am I correct?
Why the increase is based on the increase for the non-unionized workers, which is based on the inflation rate, and why the automatically triggered thing. And then the other problem with that is, for example, as non-unionized employees, is you mean every non-unionized employee in the whole place gets the same pay increase? And I don't think so. I'm just curious. Is that
so
right?
In our fire service, they're all non-union. So
so just in the fire department.
Yes, just in the fire service. So this is only for fire service members. So previous to this,
it says with unionized employees within the township. So it says within the township.
Maybe I'll get Director.
So I'm going to let the HR manager address that specific part of the clause, but I first want to mention the reason that we're here back to council for this specific reason was previous to this, the old bylaw had us returning to council annually in order to get an increase for the fire department. So now I'll let the HR manager explain.
I agree with taking it out, by the way.
Thank you.
Sarah, want to comment? Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, through you, Mayor Harding. I think there's an additional timing factor on the pay cycle with the fire, why it's March 1st, and to adjust that gets into they're paid quarterly, and it would be tricky to get them on a calendar year. So I think at one point, if we look at a different pay structure for them, we would look at changing it then. But the CPI, so it's tied to that August CPI, and it's said indirectly. So we could clarify it by saying the August CPI instead of pointing to another policy, but that it's just, we didn't adjust that language. That was sort of the traditional way we pointed back to the non-union staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? You've all heard the resolution. All those in favor? And that one is carried as well. Thank you very much. Have a resolution moved by Councillor Zavitz, second by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-45, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the corporate seal to municipal forest fire management agreement between the Corporation of Township Muskoka Lakes and the Ministry of Northern Development of Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any comments? All those in favor? That one is carried. Thank you. I think that ends our regular scheduled programming. We're going to move into closed session, Madam Clerk. Have I missed anything today? I believe I got Watson.
Yeah. All right, we're good.
Bueller, we got him.
Yeah, I think we're good.
You missed Bueller. That's okay. He's not here. I've got a resolution moved by Councillor Nishikawa, second by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that council and closed session convene at, and my watch says 4:33, or my computer does, for personal matters, about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees and labor relations or employee negotiations. One matter pursuant to section 239(2) of Municipal Act 2001. Any comments, questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Council, we're going to turn off the cameras. If you want to take 3